There's a moment in every person's life when they realize that intelligence isn't something fixed or predetermined. It's something shaped, refined, and strengthened like a muscle through the quiet choices we make every day. And the more I look at the world, the clearer it becomes that the smartest people are not the ones who talk the most or move the fastest, but the ones who have learned how to listen to their own minds, how to protect their attention, and how to think with a kind of stillness that can't be shaken by noise. Maybe that's why the ancient philosophers didn't chase intelligence through endless facts. They chased clarity, presence, and understanding. They believed that the mind becomes sharper, not by adding more, but by removing the unnecessary, by narrowing the focus, by seeing life without distortion. And somewhere in that approach, there's a quiet truth. Becoming smarter is not about overwhelming yourself, it's about aligning yourself. So if you're here because you want to think more clearly, understand yourself better, and build a mind that isn't easily pulled off track by distractions or doubt, then we're stepping into the right conversation. These habits aren't loud, they're not dramatic, but they change you from the inside out, slowly, steadily, powerfully. And before we begin, if this episode brings something meaningful into your day, feel free to like it and share it with someone who'd appreciate it. It truly helps the channel grow and keeps these conversations alive. Now, let's begin. 1. Master the art of laser-sharp focus. Focus is the doorway through which all intelligence enters your life. Without it, even the brightest ideas fade before they take shape. With it, your mind becomes a tool that cuts through confusion, that sees patterns others miss, that turns complexity into clarity. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that the mind becomes whatever it continually pays attention to, and Buddha expressed it simply: the mind is everything. What you think, you become. You can feel the truth of that in your own life. The moments when your mind drifts, when it's pulled by notifications, worries, unfinished tasks, background noise, you feel yourself thinning out, losing presence, losing depth. A scattered mind can't think sharply because it's too busy surviving the chaos around it. But the moment you choose to give your full attention to one thing, truly one thing, your entire inner world reorganizes itself. Thoughts slow down, breathing deepens, understanding becomes easier, clarity rises like something waking up inside you. Most people don't lose intelligence, they lose focus. They don't lack potential, they lack the ability to hold a thought long enough for it to evolve into insight. And this is where your power sits quietly waiting. In the decision to bring your attention back again and again, without judgment, without frustration, like a craftsman returning to his work. There's a kind of beauty in that repetition. Every time you resist the pull of distraction, you're strengthening the architecture of your mind. Every time you choose presence over noise, you're building a version of yourself capable of deeper thinking, richer understanding, and wiser decisions. And slowly, without announcing it, you become someone whose mind feels grounded, sharp, and steady. And maybe this is where true intelligence begins, not in knowing everything, but in finally learning how to hold your attention long enough to understand what truly matters. 2. Unlock the power of words. There's a moment in life when you suddenly realize that words are not just sounds leaving the mouth or symbols on a page, but the architecture of your thinking, the lens through which you understand yourself, the bridge between what you feel and what you can articulate. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice that the quality of your thoughts is always connected to the quality of your language. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that unclear words create unclear minds, and that when you learn to shape your language with intention, you begin to shape your inner world in ways that make you calmer, wiser, and far more intelligent. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, once said, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue," and the older you get, the more you see how true that is, because a single unexamined word can create misunderstandings, distort your thinking, trigger unnecessary emotions, or make a simple situation far more complicated than it needs to be. But when you choose your words carefully, when you speak to yourself with clarity and honesty, something inside you straightens. Thoughts become more defined, emotions become less chaotic, and ideas begin to form in cleaner shapes that you can actually work with. There's a quiet intelligence in learning how to name things accurately. When you can describe what you feel, you free yourself from being ruled by that feeling. When you can articulate what you want, you stop wandering in circles. When you can express an idea with precision, you start thinking with precision, and you can sense the difference almost immediately. People who speak in vague, blurry terms usually think in vague, blurry terms, while people who speak with clarity are often the ones who navigate life with confidence because their inner world isn't a fog. It's a map. Good language doesn't make you smarter by itself, but it unlocks the pathways where intelligence begins. It forces you to slow down, to choose carefully, to examine your thoughts before they harden into beliefs. It turns your mind into a place where ideas can breathe, where understanding can grow. And there's something almost transformative about learning to replace emotional exaggeration with accurate description. Instead of saying, "My life is falling apart," you learn to say, "I'm overwhelmed today, but it's temporary." Instead of saying, "Everything is against me," you realize the truth is, "I'm facing a challenge that I can get through." With just a shift in language, the entire emotional landscape changes. You're no longer drowning in the story you told yourself. You're standing on solid ground, looking at the situation as it is, not as your fear paints it. Your words become your anchor instead of your storm. And when you apply this habit to the conversations you have with others, you start to notice a shift as well. Conflicts become easier to resolve, understanding grows, relationships become healthier, and people begin to trust you more because you communicate with honesty instead of impulses or assumptions. Words either build bridges or burn them, and the wiser you become, the more you see that choosing them carefully is not a small habit. It's an act of intelligence, of emotional maturity, of self-respect. But the deepest shift happens privately, inside your own mind. When you refine your language, you refine your thinking. When you refine your thinking, you sharpen your awareness. And when your awareness sharpens, you begin to move through life with a clarity that feels rare in a world full of noise. It's in that quiet clarity that intelligence grows, slowly, steadily, until one day you realize you've become someone who doesn't just talk, but understands. Someone who doesn't just react, but reflects. Someone who doesn't just speak words, but speaks truth. And maybe that's the real power of words, not in how they sound, but in what they awaken inside you. 3. The secret to gaining clarity every day. Clarity isn't something that suddenly appears in your life like a flash of lightning. It's something you cultivate slowly through small, deliberate rituals that clear the mental fog and bring your attention back to what is real. And if you observe the people who move through life with a sense of direction and calm, you'll notice they all share this quiet habit. They create space in their day to think, to breathe, to understand themselves before the world fills their mind with noise. Lao Tzu expressed this perfectly when he said, To the mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders, and the beauty of that truth is that clarity isn't born in busyness, but in stillness. The more you slow down, the more you see. The more you pause, the more life reveals what you've been missing. Most people never give themselves that space. They wake up into urgency, rush through tasks, drown in information, and go to bed wondering why their mind feels heavy and confused. But clarity isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. It begins in the simple decision to check in with yourself before reacting to the world, to sit with your thoughts long enough to separate what is true from what is imagined, what is important from what is merely loud. When you make this a daily practice, even for a few quiet minutes, you begin to feel a shift. Life stops pushing you, and you start guiding yourself through it. There is a subtle wisdom in understanding that clarity is not about having all the answers. It's about seeing the next step without distortion. And you feel this whenever you pause long enough to ask yourself the right questions. What am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? What do I truly want in this moment? Because these questions act like lanterns in a dark room, revealing what you couldn't see while your mind was rushing. And clarity often comes not from analyzing harder, but from noticing gently. When you let your thoughts settle, patterns emerge, insights rise, and problems that felt huge begin to look solvable. The Stoics practiced this through daily reflection. Marcus Aurelius wrote each morning and evening not to appear wise, but to understand himself, to clean his inner world from the residue of the day, to return to a grounded state where he could see life clearly. And when you adopt a similar ritual, whether through writing, silent breathing, or simply sitting in your own presence without distraction, you become someone who navigates life from a place of understanding rather than confusion. People begin to feel this shift in you, the calmness in your decisions, the steadiness in your expressions, the quiet confidence of someone who thinks before they move. And the more you practice clarity, the more it becomes a kind of inner compass. You start noticing when something doesn't align with you. You sense the difference between noise and intuition. You recognize when your emotions are speaking louder than the truth. And that awareness protects your peace in ways you can't fully explain, because a clear mind is harder to manipulate, harder to discourage, harder to knock off balance. And maybe the real gift of clarity is that it reconnects you with yourself, with the part of you that already knows what to do, what matters, and what direction your life is quietly asking you to walk toward. 4. Where true growth begins. Growth doesn't start in the moments when everything is going well or when life feels comfortable and predictable. It begins in the invisible space where discomfort meets awareness, where you face the parts of yourself you've avoided, and where you choose honesty over habit. Confucius said, "He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior." And the more you experience life, the more you realize that the battles that shape you don't happen out there in the world. They happen inside you, in the place where your fears, desires, insecurities and hopes collide. True growth begins the moment you stop running from yourself and start listening to what your own mind has been trying to tell you all along. You can feel this truth in your quietest moments, when you're alone with your thoughts, and there's no one to impress, no noise to hide behind, no distractions to numb yourself with. In that silence, you begin to notice the patterns that hold you back, the stories you've repeated for years, the beliefs you inherited rather than questioned, and the fears you kept feeding because it felt safer than facing them. Most people never reach their potential because they spend their lives avoiding these inner conversations. But the ones who grow, really grow, are the ones who are willing to face themselves without flinching. There is something powerful about admitting where you've been wrong, where you've been afraid, where you've been pretending. That kind of honesty doesn't weaken you, it rebuilds you. Every time you confront a truth you used to avoid, you strengthen your inner foundation. You become someone who trusts themselves, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. Growth emerges when you stop telling yourself convenient stories and start choosing courageous ones, when you stop blaming circumstances and start examining your choices, when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" It is in that shift, that small but profound shift, that a new version of you starts forming. The Stoics practiced this through relentless self-examination, stripping away illusions until what remained was character, discipline, and clarity. And when you adopt the same approach, your life begins to feel less reactive and more intentional. You start recognizing the gap between who you are and who you want to be, not with shame, but with purpose. You begin to notice the habits that drain you, the thoughts that sabotage you, the relationships that shrink you, and instead of looking away, you look directly at them with curiosity, because that's where growth hides, in the places you once rushed past. And there's a beautiful irony here. The moment you stop running from your own flaws, they stop controlling you. The moment you stop resisting discomfort, it stops overwhelming you. By stepping toward the things you once avoided, you become stronger than the fear that used to guide your decisions. You start making choices from a grounded place, not a wounded one. You begin to understand that growth is not born from ease, but from the steady willingness to meet yourself where you are and gently push into the edges of who you can become. And maybe that's the quiet entrance to real transformation. Not dramatic change, not sudden brilliance, but the soft, steady courage to turn inward and grow from the inside out. 5. A habit that transforms everything. There's a turning point in every person's life when they realize that the biggest changes don't come from dramatic breakthroughs or sudden bursts of motivation, but from the small, consistent actions they repeat quietly, even on the days when they don't feel ready, even on the days when nothing inside them wants to try. Epictetus captured this truth in a simple line. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. It sounds almost too straightforward, yet the more you reflect on it, the more you understand that transformation isn't a moment. It's a habit, a steady shaping of your identity through the choices you make when no one is watching. Most people wait for the right mood, the right energy, the right moment to start improving their lives. And in that waiting, months pass, years pass, entire opportunities slip through their fingers because they believed that change required inspiration. But the reality is far gentler and far more humbling. The way you do small things becomes the way you do everything. The tiny, almost invisible decisions you make each day to stay consistent, to show up, to keep going, are the ones that carve new patterns into your mind and eventually rewrite the direction of your life. You begin to notice this when you commit to something simple and repeat it daily. A 5-minute reading habit becomes a deeper way of thinking. A short evening reflection becomes emotional clarity. A morning walk becomes mental discipline. These small commitments act like quiet anchors in your day, stabilizing your mind and strengthening your sense of control over your life. And slowly, without announcing itself, consistency becomes identity. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who honors their own promises, someone who is capable of more than they once believed. There's a profound intelligence in understanding that mastery is never built in leaps, but in layers. One page of reading, one moment of stillness, 1 hour of focused work, stacked day after day, becomes knowledge, becomes wisdom, becomes a new version of you. And you start to realize that the people who seem disciplined or gifted are often the ones who simply refuse to break their small habits. They understood that excellence is not a talent, but a practice. They didn't wait for a perfect day. They used the day they had. And what makes this habit truly transformative is the way it reshapes your internal dialogue. Every time you show up for a small habit, you send a quiet message to your mind. I can rely on myself. And that sense of self-trust sharpens your intelligence more than any book, any course, any motivational surge ever could. When you trust yourself to do the small things, you begin to trust yourself with the bigger things. Decisions become clearer, challenges become manageable, goals become reachable because the person pursuing them is steady, grounded, and consistent. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that you never notice the transformation while it's happening. You just wake up one day with a different voice in your head, calmer, wiser, more capable, and you realize that the habit you repeated quietly for months has changed the way you think, the way you move, the way you live. And maybe that's the real secret of transformation, not the loud breakthroughs, but the small, steady promises you keep to yourself until you become someone you barely recognize in the best possible way. 6. The hidden skill for success. There's a certain kind of intelligence that rarely gets talked about, not because it's unimportant, but because it's quiet, almost invisible, something you only notice when you look back at the people who grew the most, overcame the most, and created the most meaningful changes in their lives. It's not talent, it's not luck, it's not even discipline in the loud, dramatic sense. It's the simple, subtle ability to absorb life as it comes, to learn from each experience, to pay attention to the patterns underneath events, to allow every mistake, every challenge, every encounter to shape you into someone wiser than you were the day before. There's an old African proverb that captures this perfectly. Knowledge without wisdom is like water in the sand, and the more you reflect on it, the more you realize that success isn't about how much information you gather, but how deeply you understand the lessons hidden inside your own life. Most people move through their days without really noticing anything, repeating the same emotional reactions, falling into the same conflicts, making the same choices, wondering why nothing changes. But the people who grow, the ones who become truly intelligent, are the ones who approach life as if every moment has something to teach them. They don't rush past their mistakes. They study them. They don't shrug off discomfort. They reflect on it. They don't blame the world when things go wrong. They ask what this moment is trying to reveal about them. And in doing so, they gain an understanding that no book, no lecture, no motivational speaker could ever replace, because the wisdom they're gathering isn't theoretical. It's personal. It's woven into their experience. There's a quiet power in becoming someone who learns quickly. Not quickly in the sense of memorizing facts, but quickly in the sense of adjusting, seeing where you acted impulsively, where you misunderstood something, where you let emotion lead you, and course-correcting without ego, without self-pity, without delay. That ability to learn in real time is one of the most underrated forms of intelligence, because it means you're not doomed to repeat the same patterns for years. You evolve faster than the problem. You outgrow what once held you back. And this hidden skill becomes even more important in relationships, careers, personal goals, anything that demands emotional maturity. When you walk through life with the intention to learn, not defend, something shifts inside you. You become less reactive and more observant. You listen more. You assume less. You begin to see people not through the lens of frustration, but with a calm curiosity that reveals things you never noticed before. And this awareness sharpens your decision-making, strengthens your boundaries, and deepens your understanding of yourself and others. Every experience becomes a lesson. Every struggle becomes a teacher. Every setback becomes a blueprint. And this is where true intelligence quietly expands, not through effort alone, but through openness, through humility, through the willingness to say, if life is trying to teach me something here, I'm willing to learn it. And once you adopt that mindset, you stop being at the mercy of circumstances. You start using circumstances. The good, the bad, the confusing, the painful, all of it becomes part of your growth. And maybe that's the hidden skill that shapes every form of success, the ability to learn deeply, quickly, and honestly from everything you encounter, until wisdom becomes your second nature, and every step you take is guided by a mind that pays attention. 7. Your body's shortcut to a sharper mind. There's a quiet truth we tend to forget in a world obsessed with productivity and mental performance. Your mind cannot rise above the condition of the body that carries it. Intelligence doesn't exist in isolation. It's rooted in your physical state, shaped by the rhythms of your breath, the quality of your sleep, the food you eat, the way you move, and the space you give your body to feel alive. Jim Rohn once said, "Take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. And the more life you live, the more you realize that the moments when your thinking becomes cloudy, your focus weakens, or your emotions spiral aren't always signs of a weak mind. Sometimes they're signs of a neglected body quietly asking for attention." If you observe the patterns in your own life, you'll notice how your sharpest ideas often come after a long walk, or how your calmest thoughts appear after a good night's sleep, or how your sense of clarity increases after you drink water, stretch, or simply breathe deeply for a few quiet moments. These aren't coincidences. These are reminders that your brain is an organ, not a machine, and it relies on the health of the body to function at its highest level. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed in training the body as much as the mind, because they knew that discipline, clarity, and wisdom become harder to access when your physical state is drained, tense, or overwhelmed. Most people try to force intelligence through effort alone, pushing their minds harder and harder while ignoring the body that fuels every thought they produce. But a tired body creates a tired mind. A stressed body creates stressed reactions. A stagnant body creates stagnant thinking. And the moment you begin to care for your physical well-being, even in the simplest ways, you start to notice a shift. Focus becomes easier, patience becomes steadier, decisions become clearer, and emotional regulation becomes more natural. Small movements create big clarity. A short walk calms the noise. A few minutes of stretching release tension you didn't realize you were carrying. Even sitting up straight can change the way your mind organizes thoughts. There's a reason why some of history's greatest thinkers, from philosophers to scientists, were walkers. They understood that movement unlocks the mind, that the body's rhythm influences the brain's rhythm, that thoughts flow more freely when the body isn't trapped in stillness or stress. You've felt this yourself, how inspiration returns after you step outside, how your mood softens after exercise, how solutions appear when you change your environment. Intelligence isn't always born at a desk. Sometimes it's born in the way your feet touch the ground. And there's something deeply empowering about realizing that you don't always need dramatic change to think more clearly. Sometimes you just need to give your body what it has been quietly craving: a glass of water, sunlight, fresh air, movement, rest. None of these are complicated, yet they can transform the sharpness of your mind more than forcing yourself into hours of mental strain ever could. And maybe the real shortcut to a sharper mind isn't found in complex strategies or endless information, but in treating your body as an ally, a partner in your intelligence, and giving it the care, space, and energy it needs to help you think, feel, and understand life with greater depth. 8. Train your mind to resist distractions. There's a quiet war happening inside your mind every day, a subtle tension between what truly matters and what constantly pulls you away from it. And if you pause long enough to notice, you'll realize that most of your mental exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from being pulled in too many directions. Distraction has become the modern enemy of intelligence, not because people lack the ability to think deeply, but because they rarely give themselves the uninterrupted space required for deeper thought to emerge. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And when you look around at the endless scrolling, the notifications, the noise, you start to see how much of your mental color is being shaped by things that don't deserve a second of your life. If you look honestly at your day, you'll notice how easily attention slips. A message pulls you away from something important. A random thought derails your focus. A meaningless distraction interrupts a meaningful moment. And before you know it, hours disappear into nothingness. It's not that your mind is weak. It's that your environment is louder than it has ever been in human history. And without awareness, distraction becomes the silent thief that steals your clarity, your time, your creativity, your potential. But the moment you begin to resist, not perfectly, not every time, but intentionally, you start to reclaim your mind from the world that constantly reaches for it. There's something powerful about choosing where your attention goes. It's a kind of self-respect, a declaration that not everything deserves access to your mind. And when you commit to this choice, even in small ways, you begin to notice subtle changes. Your thoughts become deeper, your concentration lasts longer, and your inner world becomes calmer. You start finishing what you begin. You start hearing your own ideas more clearly. You start feeling less overwhelmed because you're no longer fighting 1,000 invisible interruptions. Your mind, once scattered across a dozen different stimuli, begins to unite around the things that truly matter. In many ways, resisting distraction is a form of training, like strengthening a muscle that has been neglected for too long. Each time you return to the task in front of you, each time you choose presence over impulse, each time you notice the drift and gently bring yourself back, you're reshaping your mental landscape. You're building endurance. You're sharpening your awareness. You're teaching your mind that it doesn't have to chase every signal, every urge, every flicker of stimulation. And over time, that consistency turns into clarity. The kind of clarity that fuels intelligence, creativity, emotional balance, and wise decision-making. And it's not about fighting the world or escaping technology. It's about establishing a quiet boundary inside yourself. A boundary that says, my attention is valuable. My mind is not a playground for everything around me. That awareness alone separates you from the chaos that consumes most people. It protects your peace. It preserves your energy. It gives your thoughts room to grow into something meaningful instead of drowning beneath noise. And maybe This is where your true intelligence begins to unfold, not when you fill your mind with more information, but when you remove the distractions that keep you from hearing your own thoughts in the first place. 9. Learn from the greatest minds in history. There is a kind of quiet wisdom that only appears when you allow yourself to learn from those who came before you. The thinkers, the writers, the philosophers, the scientists, the leaders who spent their lives wrestling with the same questions you wrestle with today. How to live, how to think, how to overcome fear, how to understand the world, how to understand yourself. Cicero once said, "A room without books is like a body without a soul." And when you reflect on that, you begin to see how deeply human it is to lean on the minds of others to expand your own. Because no matter how unique your experiences are, the struggles you face have been faced 1,000 times before by people who carved insights out of their suffering, their curiosity, their failures, their victories, insights that can save you years of confusion if you are willing to listen. There's something powerful about reading the words of someone who lived centuries ago and realizing that their fears mirror your fears, their doubts echo your doubts, their lessons illuminate your own path. It's almost like time collapses, and suddenly you're not alone in your journey. You're connected to a long lineage of minds that spent their lives trying to understand what it means to be human. And there's humility in that connection because it reminds you that wisdom isn't something you invent from scratch. It's something you inherit, refine, and carry forward. When you study the great minds, whether it's Seneca contemplating the nature of resilience, Buddha exploring the roots of suffering, Heraclitus reflecting on constant change, or even modern thinkers who unravel the complexities of emotion and behavior, you begin to shape your own understanding in ways that feel grounded and profound. Their ideas act like quiet mentors who challenge your assumptions, expand your perspective, and help you see life through a wider lens. You start recognizing patterns that were invisible before. You learn to think with more nuance. You begin to understand that intelligence isn't just about knowing facts. It's about seeing the world with depth, layered understanding, and emotional clarity. And it's not just books that teach you. It's stories, letters, speeches, fragments of ancient wisdom that survived because they mattered, because they carried truths strong enough to outlive their authors. And when you bring these voices into your daily life, even in small doses, you give your mind a richer vocabulary to interpret its own experiences. Suddenly your struggles have context, your emotions have roots, your decisions have guidance. You don't react blindly, you respond with the weight of centuries behind your thinking. There is also a sense of grounding that comes from realizing that the questions you face today are not new. People have asked them before, answered them before, stumbled through them before, and when you learn from their journeys, you save yourself from repeating their mistakes. You gain insight without having to be burned by every flame. Wisdom becomes less of a mystery and more of a practice of listening, absorbing, integrating. And maybe that's the quiet beauty of learning from history's greatest minds. Not that they give you all the answers, but that they teach you how to ask better questions, how to think more clearly, how to understand yourself with a depth that makes life feel less chaotic and far more meaningful. 10. The discipline of asking better questions. There's a quiet shift that happens inside you the moment you realize that intelligence isn't measured by how many answers you know, but by the quality of the questions you dare to ask yourself. Socrates captured this truth in a single, timeless reminder. Wisdom begins in wonder. And the more you sit with that line, the more you understand that the difference between staying stuck and moving forward in life often comes down to the questions you choose to ask. The ones that open doors instead of closing them, the ones that peel back the layers of fear, confusion, or ego to reveal a deeper truth waiting underneath. Most people ask questions that keep them trapped. Why is this happening to me? What if it all goes wrong? Why can't I ever get it right? And these questions don't expand the mind, they shrink it. But the moment you shift the frame, even slightly, your entire inner world begins to change. There's a profound intelligence in asking questions that challenge your assumptions. What if the obstacle you're facing is teaching you something essential? What if the person you're frustrated with is reflecting something you haven't noticed in yourself? What if the fear you're feeling isn't a barrier, but a compass pointing toward growth? Questions like these don't just change your thinking, they change the way you interpret your life. They turn confusion into clarity, frustration into insight, and uncertainty into possibility. And this simple habit, asking better questions, becomes a form of self-guidance, an inner compass that sharpens your awareness and helps you navigate complexity with more nuance and emotional maturity. You start to notice this transformation in small moments. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of assuming, you examine. Instead of judging, you become curious. Curiosity is one of the most underrated forms of intelligence, not because it gives you immediate answers, but because it opens the door to deeper understanding. When you approach your struggles with curiosity instead of fear, everything feels less overwhelming. Your thoughts expand, your emotions soften, your perspective widens. You begin to see layers where before you saw only walls. And there is a discipline to this practice. It requires honesty, the courage to ask yourself what role you played in your own pain, what patterns you repeat without noticing, what truths you've been avoiding because they force you to grow. Most people avoid these questions because they're uncomfortable, but those who embrace them develop a wisdom that feels both steady and liberating. They move through life with less confusion because they constantly refine their understanding of themselves. They stop making decisions blindly because they're guided by deeper self-awareness rather than impulse or fear. Questions become the quiet tools that reshape your identity. They teach you to think beyond the surface. They help you see your emotions without drowning in them. They reveal possibilities where your old worldview saw limitations. And over time, this habit shapes a mind that is more flexible, more resilient, more capable of holding complexity without collapsing under it. A mind that grows continuously because it refuses to settle for easy answers. And maybe, the real measure of an intelligent life isn't found in certainty, but in the willingness to keep asking, keep exploring, keep wondering, long after others have stopped looking beneath the surface. 11. Strengthen your awareness through silence. There is a depth inside you that only reveals itself when the noise fades, when the world quiets down, when your thoughts finally stop rushing long enough for you to hear what has been speaking beneath the surface. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of awareness, a space where your mind returns to its original clarity, where your emotions unwind, where your inner voice becomes audible after being buried under noise for too long. Lao Tzu understood this when he said, "Silence is a source of great strength, and the older you get, the more obvious this becomes. The greatest insights in your life don't appear in moments of noise or urgency, but in the gentle stillness, where everything unnecessary falls away." Most people avoid silence without realizing it. They fill every moment with music, conversations, scrolling, distractions, anything to escape the discomfort of sitting alone with their own mind. But the truth is that silence is not frightening. It's revealing. It shows you what you truly feel, what you secretly fear, what you deeply want, what you've been avoiding. And although that honesty can be uncomfortable, it is also liberating, because you cannot change what you cannot see, and silence is the mirror that finally shows you the truth of your inner world. There is a quiet intelligence that grows when you learn to sit with yourself. You begin to sense your emotions more clearly, where they come from, how they rise, what they're trying to tell you. You notice the tension you've been carrying in your body, the worries looping in your mind, the unresolved thoughts asking for attention. And instead of being overwhelmed by them, you start observing them with calm curiosity. You begin to understand that not every thought deserves a reaction, not every emotion needs a story, and not every fear deserves a place in your decision-making. In silence, you discover the difference between the mind's noise and the heart's truth. And this awareness slowly shapes the way you move through life. You become less reactive and more intentional. You stop rushing into conversations just to fill space. You choose your words more carefully. You begin to sense the emotional atmosphere around you, what people are feeling even when they don't say it, what tension exists beneath a moment, what truth is hiding behind someone's expression. Silence sharpens your perception, not only of yourself, but of others. It makes you wiser in conflicts, calmer in chaos, more grounded in decision-making. The more time you spend in silence, the more you realize it's not emptiness, it's clarity. It's the doorway back to your center, a quiet rebalancing of the mind and the heart. In a world filled with constant distraction, silence becomes a power few people ever access, because it requires patience, presence, and humility. But those who embrace it discover a calm confidence that can't be shaken by noise or chaos. They move through life with a quiet strength, because their awareness is rooted deeply within themselves rather than scattered across the world outside. And maybe silence is not something you escape to, but something you return home to, a place where your mind can breathe, your heart can settle, and your intelligence can expand in ways that only stillness makes possible. 12. Rewire your thinking through reflective journaling. There is a kind of transformation that only happens when your thoughts leave your mind and land on a page, when the invisible patterns you've been living with become visible in front of you, when the fog in your mind takes shape as words, and when confusion finally organizes itself into something you can understand. Socrates said, "An unexamined life is not worth living," not as a dramatic warning, but as a reminder that understanding yourself is the foundation of wisdom. And journaling, even in its simplest form, becomes one of the most powerful tools for that understanding, not because you're writing to be a great author, but because you're writing to be honest, to be awake, to be present with your own mind. Most people carry their thoughts like heavy luggage, worries, regrets, unfinished feelings, old memories, imagined fears, all sitting in a crowded mental space, swirling and circling without ever settling. And when your mind stays full, clarity becomes impossible. But the moment you begin to write, even a few simple sentences, something starts to shift. You create distance between yourself and your thoughts. You begin to see which emotions are temporary and which ones are asking for healing. You begin to recognize which patterns repeat and which ones need to end. Writing becomes a mirror, reflecting truths you've been too busy or too distracted to notice. There's a quiet intelligence that emerges through this process. When you put your thoughts on paper, you slow them down enough to understand them. You begin to ask deeper questions. You see the roots beneath your reactions. You realize that the problem you've been anxious about isn't as big as it felt when it was just floating in your mind. And sometimes, as you write, solutions reveal themselves, not because the world changed, but because your perspective did. The act of journaling untangles knots that thinking alone can't reach. Over time, journaling becomes something more than a habit. It becomes a form of inner dialogue, a place where you can tell the truth without judgment, where you can process emotions before they spill into your decisions, where you can release the thoughts that don't serve you and strengthen the ones that do. You start seeing your growth in real time. The fears that used to overwhelm you begin to soften. The goals that once felt distant begin to take shape. The version of yourself from months ago looks smaller, not because they were weak, but because you've outgrown them. And what makes journaling so powerful is that it doesn't require rules or structure. You don't need perfect grammar or beautiful lines. You just need sincerity, a willingness to look inward instead of outward. Write what scares you. Write what excites you. Write what confuses you. Write what you wish you could say out loud. When your inner world becomes clear on the page, your outer world becomes far easier to navigate. You make decisions with more certainty. You react with more balance. You understand yourself with more depth. Journaling is not just recording your life. It's rewriting your relationship with it. It teaches you how to think, not just how to feel. It teaches you how to observe, not just how to react. It teaches you how to grow, not just how to endure. And slowly, quietly, you begin to notice that the person writing today is more aware, more grounded, more intelligent than the person who wrote yesterday. And maybe that's the real gift of journaling, the way it turns your mind into a place you can finally understand, a place where wisdom has room to take root, and a place where your future self begins to take shape, one honest line at a time. 13. Build the habit of micro-learning. There is something quietly powerful about understanding that you don't need hours of study or massive bursts of effort to become smarter. Sometimes, all you need are a few minutes each day, a small dose of new information, a single idea that challenges you, a short reflection that reshapes how you see the world. Peter Marshall once said, "Small deeds done are better than great deeds planned." And the more you sit with those words, the more you realize how deeply they capture the essence of micro-learning. Because intelligence isn't built in dramatic leaps, it's built in steady layers, tiny insights that accumulate day after day until your mind becomes sharper, your awareness becomes deeper, and your understanding of life becomes richer than you ever expected. Most people fall into the trap of thinking they must dedicate hours to learning in order to grow, and because their lives are busy, they never begin at all. They postpone learning for someday, a day that rarely comes. But when you shift your mindset and understand that learning can happen in small moments, 5 minutes of reading, a page from a book, a short educational video, an insightful paragraph, a single idea worth remembering, suddenly growth becomes accessible. You turn idle minutes into meaningful ones. Waiting becomes learning. Quiet moments become expansions. Even routine days begin to feel like opportunities rather than obligations. There's a gentle intelligence in learning a little bit every day. You don't overwhelm your mind. You feed it just enough to stay awake, curious and engaged. And these small steps have a compounding effect. A single new idea can change the direction of your thoughts. A short piece of wisdom can shift how you respond to conflict. A new perspective can dissolve an old belief that once limited you. Micro-learning reshapes your mind in subtle ways that only become visible when you look back months later and realize how much you've grown. And what makes this habit so powerful is that it cultivates curiosity, the root of all intelligence. When you expose yourself to small doses of knowledge consistently, your mind stays open. You begin to ask more questions. You start noticing connections between ideas. Your thinking becomes more flexible and less attached to old assumptions. And slowly, your worldview expands, not through pressure, but through gentle exploration. You grow almost accidentally, simply because you keep feeding your mind small portions of insight. The beauty of micro-learning is that it fits into any life. You can do it while drinking coffee, during a short break, before bed, in the quiet of the morning, or in the moments when your mind is searching for something meaningful to hold on to. It doesn't demand perfection or discipline in dramatic forms. It only asks for presence. And presence is something you can always give, even on your hardest days. Over time, these small fragments of learning begin to weave together, creating a mind that feels alive, alert, and constantly evolving. You become someone who grows without forcing growth, someone who learns without drowning in information, someone who carries quiet confidence because their mind is constantly being enriched, not in overwhelming waves, but in gentle, sustainable ripples. And maybe that's the true brilliance of micro-learning, the way it transforms your mind not through intensity, but through consistency, allowing you to build a smarter, wiser, more curious version of yourself, one small insight at a time. 14. Practice the Stoic pause before reacting. There is a quiet power in the moment between stimulus and response, a small, barely noticeable space where your entire life can shift depending on what you choose to do with it. Most people move through the world on autopilot, reacting to everything instantly, letting emotions take the lead before the mind has even had a chance to breathe. But wisdom lives in the pause. Strength lives in the pause. Intelligence lives in the pause. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply when he wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." And when you sit with that line for a moment, you begin to see how often your suffering comes not from what happens to you, but from how quickly and unconsciously you react to it. The Stoic pause is not about suppressing emotions or pretending you don't feel anything. It's about creating a moment of awareness before the reaction takes over. A moment where you step back, observe the situation from a wider perspective, and ask yourself what response aligns with the person you want to be, rather than the emotion you feel in the moment. In that pause, anger softens, fear becomes smaller, confusion becomes clearer. The mind returns to balance long enough to choose wisely instead of blindly. And with practice, this habit becomes a kind of inner freedom, the freedom to respond instead of react. You begin to notice this shift in everyday moments. Someone's tone bothers you, but instead of snapping back, you breathe. A problem appears, but instead of panicking, you observe it. A misunderstanding arises, but instead of escalating it, you wait long enough to understand before assuming. This pause protects your peace in ways you can't measure. It saves relationships, shields your energy, preserves your clarity, and prevents days from being ruined by seconds of impulsive behavior. And strangely enough, people begin to feel this calm in you. They trust you more, they open up